my alter ego was called Pearl Pistol, and she was this fast-talking booty licker from Chicago, because at the time I was down in the South and everyone like, y'all talk so slow, you know? And so come through as Pearl Pistol, she was like, hey, we're gonna get this party started, you know? And so when I had those sort of slower, quieter moments, which are totally important, like I took a nap in the bath yesterday, not Whitney Houston, but like I just like laid there and was like, okay. And then I was like, and tomorrow Pearl Pistol is coming out because we have got some things to talk about, right? And so I love that when we did the pre-show to get started, you know, we're like, let's be real, let's feel the feels and let's move through some stuff, because that's life, right? Like we don't always get the A roll, right? And so when I feel those kind of moments of unsteady, like, yes, I do phone a friend, I lean into community. That's the first thing. I'm a verbal processor. And then I tend to like go inside and be kind of emo and write in my journal. And then I dance. And then I'm like, let's go. You know, like, let's turn up this energy. Let's flip the script. What would Pearl Pistol do? You know, she certainly wouldn't be wearing pants. So, you know.
Welcome to the VIRIVERSE, Immersive Sustainability by VIRIVERSE. We are a storytelling and mentorship platform designed to support and inspire the sustainability champions of the world. This supergroup of changemakers wields circularity, art, and science to write a formula for the very best of humanity. And together, we make saving the world fun. Hello friends, Chance here. So you are about to watch the recording that you came here for, but this is coming at you kind of post-production here. I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge something that we observed during this conversation. One, it's freaking the best one we've done. It's fun, dark humor, it's passionate and heartfelt and useful and all those good things. But we noticed something technically that was creating some nonverbal messaging that we weren't aware of, and we also don't know if our guests felt this or experienced it, but we did watching it back. In the video feeds that you will see, I am looking down at the camera, and that was because of some issues on my end. I was in Airbnb in San Diego, and I didn't have a great setup, so I kind of had to makeshift it, and I wanted the camera to be at eye level. Instead, it was down, like I'm talking to you right now. So in this particular conversation, where we're talking about gender dynamics and how we make each other feel and things, there is kind of a white dude looking down at women talking a little bit. And so it makes a world of a difference if we're talking at eye level, like peers here. So we wanted to acknowledge this. And of course, we didn't mean to do that. There was nothing intentional there. But the sustainability lesson in this, the diversity lesson, the equality lesson in this is that check your nonverbal messaging. See what you might be doing unintentionally. Examine your environment to make sure that you're setting up a welcoming space for everybody that is participating in it. Thank you and enjoy.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I am here in sunny San Diego this week and very, very excited to be here with Aurora, our new co-host to these conversations. So we'll talk about that in a minute. And then, of course, we have the wonderful Rose Kaz. And Rose, if you want to say hello.
Hello. Nice to be here and good to meet you all.
All right, so let's talk about Rose for a minute. So having made her mark as an internationally published portrait photographer, owner, and lead photo queen at the all-women owned and operated Rose Photo and Video, a boutique wedding and lifestyle photography studio in Chicago, Illinois, and Asheville, North Carolina. Rose Kaz is excited to connect with all women in business and grow great networks around the world. Through the app, she's building what she calls the LBI, or Ladyboss International Backstage Pass. Rose supports women in business globally with the tools and resources to flip the script, change the status quo, and build a more equal world for us all with women at the helm. Think hashtag feminist, Facebook, matriarchal, MySpace, and real hashtag Ladyboss LinkedIn. Absolutely love this. So we will jump into the conversation with Rose here just in just a minute. But of course, today we are here to talk about how women can lead us to a sustainable future. So my dear friend Aurora here, we thought that it would be lovely to bring her on to help guide and facilitate some of this conversation and get this white guy out of the way a little bit. So of course I'm here and will be actively participating in the conversation, but I'm really, really excited to listen and learn from both Aurora and Rose. And Aurora is coming back. She was a guest a couple of weeks ago. Aurora, do you want to just do a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. So you're going to learn a little bit more about me along the way, but my name is Aurora. I have a company called Astrapto, means to illuminate. We're going to come back to that concept as we intersect that with Rose's theme of glow. And I want to be a light to illuminate people's journeys to sustainability, trying to make it positive, approachable, fun, interesting, and do a lot of that through teaching, coaching, consulting, the usual stuff. And excited to be able to join this Viridescent platform. Chance has been a friend and colleague, peer for a number of years, and it's just exciting to see how our respective paths have evolved and are converging, and it's just exciting to see what's going to come of it. So thank you so much, Chance, and your team for giving me the opportunity to be part of what you're trying to achieve here.
So let's dive into the conversation. We've got 4 kind of talking points. So we're going to go through Rose's origin story, and Aurora is going to kind of facilitate the conversation there. We'll talk about Ladyboss International and her programs. And then we're really going to lean into kind of this idea of female empowerment and leadership, and what the strategies and value systems are there, and how to execute on female entrepreneurship and all the great things that women can do to lead us to a sustainable future. And then of course we're going to talk about the backstage pass that is Ladyboss International's kind of newest, most exciting program. So we'll talk a lot about that, but let's start with the origin story. So Aurora, I'm going to flip it over to you.
Okay, so in the spirit of introducing myself by all things I am known for, I go by Aurora. I also go by Dawn. That is what my parents, I grew up being called Dawn. Sometimes people hear me being called Dawn by somebody in the audience. They're like, I can't get used to that. Get used to it. We all carry multiple identities in this world. I'm also Dr. Benton, and in the VIRIVERSE, let me just show you real quick. I am the change maker. I was one of the early people to get an alter ego, and so I am very proud of that. So I want to set the stage for this question just with a little bit of my own journey. And Rose, I'm really excited to hear what your journey is and how maybe your perspective and background, I guess, would differ from kind of what brought me to where I am as a lady boss, right? As a female entrepreneur. About 5 years ago, actually, I recently, just this past week, celebrated the 5-year anniversary of my company, Astrapto. Like, wow, there's something amazing about that, right? So a little over 5 years ago, I found myself in a situation where I'd been laid off from a company, and I had changed careers and reinvented myself several times. I was always assertive, always a leader. And so I found myself at another sort of crossroads, and what am I going to do with my life? And I had been working in social impact off and on, kind of on the side. I'd co-founded an incubator in Chicago, by the way. I was doing a lot of social impact work and teaching, but there was this voice in my head that was always saying, one day I want to do this full time. This is going to be the only thing I do. And I had been laid off, and I was like listening to that voice. And I'm like, what the hell, Jay, are you waiting on? You're 46 years old. And I was reading this book called The Confidence Code that explored how women, powerful, extraordinary women, have sort of come into their confidence, and comparing that confidence development to the way men have traditionally developed confidence. And it was an eye opener. I mean, like, I had never considered myself a feminist, and I had never considered myself a victim of sexism. And oh my God, I realized that that voice that doubted was me sort of putting myself into a traditional role of needing someone else's permission, probably a white man's permission, a boss's permission, a job title or whatever. And that was pretty transformational for me, because I said, from now on, I drew a line in the sand and I said, from now on, this is my full-time thing. This is what I do. This is my lane, and no one's going to push me out of it. And so that happened a bit late in life for me. Maybe that's a generational thing, right? I'm Gen X. I'll be 52 in a couple of weeks. And so I would imagine, Rose, you're younger than I am, and you probably, maybe there is a generational element. Maybe it's the way you're raised. Maybe it's where you're raised. There could be various elements to that. So I would love to hear your origin story. And my particular interest is how you tapped into the confidence to step over that line and be that. Or maybe for you, it was just like, it's just like breathing and you don't even question it. So dive in and tell us more about how you came to be where you are. And then we're going to explore and unpack your alter ego and the elements of that.
Oh, I love this. I love this. Thank you, Dr. Benton. And, all the layers of what we're going to be talking about, I'm excited to be here, and thank you for hosting me and these wonderful questions. So, it's interesting when I think about my origin story compared to yours or other women's, because on one hand, Oprah, stay in your lane, just do your thing, right? And as a creative, as a photographer, as a videographer, as somebody who is an artist, like first and foremost, that's what I am. Well, I'm a woman, and then I'm an artist, right? And then I'm an entrepreneur, and then I'm 5,000 other things all in one day. I had to really, and still, not look at other people's work, because it would constantly make me think my work can never be good enough, right? As a visual artist. And so every now and again, I'll go look at somebody's work and I'm like, oh my God, that's so stunning. My work is like nowhere near that, right? And I'll say, that's enough. Their work is stunning. You don't have to compare, right? And so I've early on in my career, as a young woman, really tried to not compare myself. But I also think it's really interesting to think about, there are perhaps lady bosses amongst us who are very tenacious. I am a terrier. My spirit animal is terrier. And there are lady bosses that are maybe not so terrier-ish. Maybe they use their energies in different ways. And so what I can say is that forever. And my mother, I have a photograph, Olin Mills style, of my mother, my grandmother, and my great grandmother, all, right here to my left. Off camera, it's a little cheesy, but it's near and dear to my heart. So it's in my space on a regular basis. And, I am of them. They are my OG lady bosses, right? I was always a troublemaker. I was always like, well, I have a question. Why? Always getting in trouble. And most often the lady bosses in my life, like all they had to do is go, oh, sorry, ma'am, because absolute respect for women in authority. However, I had a lot of trouble. If my granddad tried to yell at me, like they'd be like, whoa, she's going to talk, she's going to sass, or at school pretty regularly. My school teachers were men all the time. They'd say, you're misbehaving. I'd be like, am I? I'm just asking a question. I was a sassy little one. And so that's the origin of this lady boss. But I have to also tell you, in the same breath, I'm on a regular basis saying, am I even worthy to be doing this work? This is a lot of work that I'm trying to push into the world with this Ladyboss International programming. Am I the right person? Because I am not sure I'm built for this. And then it's like the next day I'm like, oh yeah, you are. Here we go. And so I have these dips where I feel like I need to have somebody, perhaps a male's, please write this way. And then other times where I'm just kicking that damn door in and I'm like, look out, we're coming through. And while that's wonderful to have that tenacious spirit, I feel a little bit maddening, a little manic to have the like lows of, oh, I'm not worthy for this. I'm not able to do it. And I've felt it, like I said, in my photograph career, which I continue to push forward on, even as I build this community for women in business, because I learned that in the third year of my business, having a production company for photo and video production, while I knew all of the hard skills, if you will, of like how to capture good content. I learned a lot of that from old white guys. I don't really know how they, like we somehow got along enough for that, because I really saw this goal. And to me, they were, it wasn't like I chose them. It's like many fields, a male dominated field. And so #MeToo, as I was growing my own business, I thought, okay, so I can do all this I can do, but what about like managing, and what about, picking myself up after I face plant, and what about all of these other sort of more soft skills that I think are equally as important? And I kept finding myself doubting that I had those skills, because maybe, I'm young lady, kiddo, things, words like this that I had been called by those same men, by my accountants that I was paying hundreds of dollars an hour. And it had me second guessing, am I really a lady boss? Like, do I really have the tenacity to do this work, to show up in business, but also as a leader in business? And while like this week, I've asked myself that, and then I snap myself out of it. And I dig into my books, I dig into my own journals, I lean into other women. And that's actually how Ladyboss International even began, is at that 3-year mark, I was like, what am I doing? Maybe I should just go ahead and become a dental hygienist. No shame on that game, but like, I should just get a job, go to work and do the thing and go home. And I said, I don't think I'm made for that. Let me pull the audience. Let me phone a friend. And so I developed this panel conversation with women in any stage of their business, in any field, any demographic, any size, any shape, any skin tone, and said, ladies, let's talk about this. And what I realized is that I wasn't the only one that has that swing from like, oh, hell yeah, to, oh God, I don't know, right? And so it's that balance that I find is so wonderful to talk about. So I love you started with this question, Aurora, because it's really, it's not like all of a sudden I'm here and I'm a lady boss, or, oh God, I'm here and I'll always stay here, right? Not that you're below or above, but from that, as you said, reading that book, The Confidence Code, it sort of opened up your eyes like, oh my goodness, I just was reading this whole story about what I'm to do based on this story, but what about, I don't necessarily believe that story, right?
Yeah, so much of what you're saying totally resonates with me. And I think it's interesting how, so for me, I am the kind of person, and maybe based on some of the things you're saying, this would resonate with you. I feel like I need to be completely transparent. I need to have full integrity, and I need to be very visible and seen. So it's almost like I want the world to know about my ups and downs, because I want them to know that this is the truth of what I'm living, so that they can feel a little bit sorry for me and help me like pick up. And I think that people like you and I and other women who are certainly on the call and who are perceived as very strong, I think people just think you're always on, and that you're always good, and that you're, like good as in like, it's all good. Like, I'm good. And I have learned to really appreciate friendships with people like Chance, because I can be very authentic and just be like, it is in the shit right now. Like, I am in a dark place and I don't know what I'm going to do. And just have like that. And I couldn't do that before. I don't think that was something that I could have. I couldn't have those conversations 5 years ago in that way. And so I find that that's an important part of my journey. So in this journey, as you're surrounding yourself with people, and maybe this is where we can transition a little bit, if it is relevant, into your alter ego components, because you talked about the terrier, the tenacity, and maybe some of those other pieces, and how it relates to just like where you can find your confidence and your comfort when the dip moments happen, right? Because if I remember correctly, I believe your story is that you no longer have your 3 OG lady bosses with you. And so how do you spring back when you're having the swings, and who do you go to for that?
Thank you for that. And yes, my OG lady bosses have all floated on, and 2 of the 3 of them left the planet in a very short time. My mother passed away actually 7 years ago, yesterday. So been really honoring her. And her sister, her younger sister was kind of like my oldest sister, passed away 6 months before that. And their mother, my grandma, a year and a day before that. So it was like, we called it the Kennedy years. It was a shit show. And that, right, that's right around when I started my business. I didn't mean for it to go like that. Right. But that's 3 years in, when I was like, I need my ladies, that was when I began to lean into community, lean in these conversations. Like you said, be vulnerable. Like, I don't actually know what I'm doing, or it's actually like, I'm deep in grief, but I'm running a business and I'm ugly crying the whole damn time. Like, what? Right. But when you talk about alter ego, I can't help but think of something else that is definitely part of my origin story, a whole other gaggle, if you will, of OG lady bosses. So I have an undergrad in political science, and I was going to be a lawyer, and then I quickly took a hard left, and started studying more of my art, and I started to write for political theater, which I loved. I ended up being a part of a burlesque troupe. My mother was a little disappointed that I didn't actually, go the academic route. I went instead the theater route with that degree. But nonetheless, we all had stage names, and we had these alter egos, and we literally built, this is one of my favorite things to do with them, we built altars for each woman to be photographed on as their alter ego and their sort of superpower. And these were professional women. These were doctors, lawyers, speech pathologists, obviously I need one, speech pathologists, authors, incredible group of badass women. And, by day they were doing their biz, and by night they were like doing their biz. And these shows were awesome. We packed like 400 seats, tickets sold out. And it was one of my favorite times as a young lady boss. And I was grounded as a feminist. Like, I was like, oh yes. And a witty one at that. Right. And so a lot of times when I fall into this sort of like victim or sad, or like, I can't even, I'm like, what would Pearl Pistol do? My alter ego was called Pearl Pistol, and she was this fast talking booty licker from Chicago, because at the time I was down in the South, and everyone like, y'all talk so slow, And so come through as Pearl Pistol, she was like, hey, we're gonna get this party started, And so when I have those sort of slower, quieter moments, which are totally important, like I took a nap in the bath yesterday, not Whitney Houston, but like I just like laid there and was like, okay. And then I was like, and tomorrow Pearl Pistol is coming out because we have got some things to talk about. Right. And so I love that when we did the pre-show to get started, you're like, let's be real, let's feel the feels, and let's move through some stuff, because that's life, right? Like, we don't always get the A roll. Right. And so when I feel those kind of moments of unsteady, like, yes, I do phone a friend, I lean into community. That's the first thing. I'm a verbal processor. And then I tend to like go inside and be kind of emo and write in my journal. And then I dance. And then I'm like, let's go, like, let's turn up this energy. Let's flip the script. What would Pearl Pistol do? She certainly wouldn't be wearing pants. So,
So, oh man, I have to jump in. One, it's hilarious and awesome, but it's also inspiring. So let's, Rora's kind of teased this a little bit. Let's build your sustainability alter ego here in the VIRIVERSE, and kind of see it, right? So, to start, what is your favorite animal and why? And Aurora alluded to this ferocity, which I think is so awesome when you look at this little dog that has something, right? So you chose a terrier. Why?
It's so funny, because when I saw the show flyer, I was like, oh, is that a terrier? Oh, is that me? Oh, that's cute. I don't know if I have a favorite animal per se, but I've been compared to a terrier because terriers don't ever stop, ever. And sometimes you're like, oh, that's cute. And sometimes you're like, oh my God, right? It's sort of my Achilles heel. And I just also think that from the perspective of, like being the squeaky wheel or the yipper, or like, there's some times where it's better to be quiet. And I have learned that the hard way. But sometimes no one's going to say anything. And I'll be the first one to be like, all right, I would like to say something about that. Or I might not even ask permission to say something about that. Right. And so I'm definitely the squeaky wheel. I'm a bit of the yipper. It is my Achilles. It is my superpower that can sometimes get me in trouble, but also sometimes helps me push the envelope forward.
So a question in there, something you noted there about sometimes people won't say something, so I'm going to, right? Is that something that do you feel the same when you're in any room, or is it something like when you're in a room of women, sometimes there's that reserve and they don't want to say something? Or is this something you observe a lot? Because I know like I see that too in any room that I walk into, and I have a tendency to do the same thing, which sometimes is good, sometimes it's not. But I'd just be curious how you kind of perceive that when you're in different rooms of diversity and things. What does that feel like for you? And do you experience some of those, like sometimes you're all there, you're ready to say something, and other times you're like, should I say something? Does that affect you some in there too?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's like both my alter ego, Pearl Pistol, and myself, Rose, are aware of our audience. Like I think it's important for everybody to be aware. Like I just did a pitch room this morning, pitch please, in Clubhouse for Ladyboss, and it's like we have to know our audience. Like are we literally in an elevator? Are we on a stage? Are we on a show? Knowing our audience, I think, is key. And so if I'm in a room where it's all women, I always notice that it's quiet longer, because we've been spoken over so often that we never want to speak over another woman. And when someone does, it's like, oh, right. And then in other spaces where it's where there's maybe more men people, it's like, I noticed, like Clubhouse is a great example, right? Because you can just really see, you're like, oh, wow, this is okay. It's a totally different tempo, feels differently. And then my perspective of being in rooms where there's a wide variety of people from different demographics, I'm always willing to like wait until, whether it's a man or a woman, like I just don't want to be the first one to speak, simply because I want to yield the mic to somebody who maybe hasn't even had access to a mic for so many years, right? So again, just like knowing our audience and being mindful. But then again, if it's quiet and no one's saying anything, like I'm not going to be shy. I want to be kind and conscious about my level of terrier.
And that's really good leadership, right? I think that's a good leadership principle, sustainable leadership principle for anybody, any gender, race, culture, whatever perspective, is sit back and wait. You don't have to be the first to say something. I know I was in a Clubhouse room with a guy named Kevin Rao, who does sustainability work and community resiliency. And the room there's a lot of moderators, but it was really heavily dominated by the men people in the room, as you would say, right? And they were kind of talking, but there's so many women kind of sitting there and listening and all that. And Kevin was like, I'm actually going to kick myself off the stage and see if we can get some more diverse voices. And all of a sudden the women came up and was like, boom. And then they carried the conversation for a while and we sat back and listened. And it's like, so sometimes those things, like those moments, can be really powerful. And, the key is let's weave in and out and back and forth and talk together as people, right? So I love this. Okay.
That's such a good point, Jess, because sometimes when not given the opportunity, certain people, like whether it's people of color, women, like if over the years and years we've been trained that there's not an opportunity for us to speak, or we may not speak until someone grants us permission, then that's the training, right? And so if we can then change that training for ourselves, but also for the person next to us, and say, oh, excuse me, please let me, like that person moving themselves to the audience, amazing, because that literally made space on the stage for somebody else to come up and say, oh, okay. And I think we have to model that behavior and that change that we want to see in the world.
Yeah, that's one of those moments where both literally and figuratively space has been made. And I love that. Okay, number 2. Let's go to nature element. What is your favorite nature element? And I love this in so many ways, but I'm really curious what this means to you, because I think it's been built into your business model even, right? So yeah.
What did I say? Sparkle? I can't remember.
Light, right? It was, and I remember, and the reason, I'll never forget it, because you were like, it's absolutely light, because I work with it every day.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I was like, I'm trying to remember what I wrote. I'm like, based on the graphic, I'm like, did I really say sparkle? Because that's but light, yes. I mean, as somebody who works with cameras, light is super key, right? Like you all were like, oh, your light's perfect. Like that's what I work with, right? Sitting in front of this big, huge window here, because like I want it to look like I got 8 to 10 hours of sleep, even though I didn't, right? But also when I'm walking down the street, or even like last night sitting in the bathtub, I saw this like light coming through the window. The bathroom has no windows in it, but I was like, oh, where's that coming from? Like I chase light all this time. And then in making portraiture and making video work, it's always like, where's the light? But what I also think is really interesting, when I'll get a little meta, I'm sure I'm in good company on this. Of course, that makes things look visually pleasing and balanced and saturated and all the stuff that I like to do working professionally with light. But what I love to do is think about like why I'm attracted to light, and why the moon's light affects me a certain way, or why when the sun is setting and it's bouncing off of this building and reflecting off of this mirror, why I'm just like tantalized by it. Like I'm just like, why am I obsessed? Like I'm literally obsessed with it. And it must be, I'm thinking it's because I'm a plant and I require sun and light to grow, but there's also something that's inexplicable about light. Like I can train it, I can bend it, I can mold it, I can, make it my tool, but I also I'm not in charge of it, right? Like I have to be able to shift it. And if it's like, oh, that light's not working, let's move this. Like I have to actually reposition myself or my subjects or my extra light or whatever I'm working with professionally based on what the available light is. And I use that as a metaphor for myself. Like if I can't have access to the light I want, like how can I move? How can I shift? Like sometimes I'll get a message from a friend who's having a bad day and I'll be like, can you like put your head below your heart? Can you shift your perspective? Can you like close your eyes? Can you change the way the light is getting in for a minute, just so that when you open up, it's slightly different. And that's why I love my job, is because I get to see people, but I also get to work with like their light, to get to like, cheesy about it, but like seeing their light and shifting the light around them to like put them in the best light.
One of our sustainability beacons here in the VIRIVERSE is lighting up the darkness. So all cheese, we love cheese here. Yeah, it's good. Wow, okay. And then the last element, and then I think after we go through this, Aurora will kick over to a mindful minute, take a break, go sit by the beach actually for a minute. And then we'll go into your question, because I know you have kind of a second part to this question about like the light and this idea of glowing a little bit. But the last question is, what is your sustainability beacon, Rose? So the thing that inspires you, motivates you to want to make the world a better place, more sustainable place.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a lot. There's a lot of things that I want to do relative to this, and the why for it. I'm trying to remember what I actually wrote, and I apologize. I wrote a lot of these things like I need to get into this, and then I was doing this launch last week. But as a young person, my mother was very conscious, probably more from a thrifty perspective than it was like an ecological perspective. And even being raised by my great grandmother, who, raised children during the Depression. So I have a whole bag of bags. Like when I pass people, I'm like, how old was this woman? I am just like, it comes from being raised in, I think, like an old European home, but also then I carried on to go to school. I went to a school that was very sustainable, Warren Wilson College. And so what I had learned, not from the necessarily perspective of saving the planet, more as just being thrifty, was reinstated to me in a way of preservation and consciousness and conscious consumerism. And so I think from that perspective of how can we be more conscious of what we consume, who we purchase our consumption from, right? Like where are we purchasing from? What is it that we're purchasing? And then what's left over after we purchase, right? Whether it's like what Sujata was mentioning around plastics, whether it's like a feeling of like, buyer's remorse because I just went and swiped on a bunch of shit I don't need, fast fashion or whatever, or it's, something where I'm actually investing in businesses owned by people of color, BIPOC folks and POC, and can I feel good about that, but can I feel like that's doing something, right? And so this idea of a beacon of sustainability for me is conscious capitalism, right? And I know that's been talked about for years, but like, can we actually make that happen? Because these ideas that I see sprinkling around that are very parallel to the work we're doing for the Backstage Pass, so really inspiring. And I want us to do more of that, because I think we can't wait for our governments to say, okay, we're going to go clean up the oceans now, or we're going to go stop fossil fuels. Yes, like 10 minutes ago, much faster, right? And so can we take our consumption to a more conscious place?
Well, I am in San Diego at a trade show called Sustainable Brands, and thousands of people working to affect change both within and outside of the system would tell you that we absolutely can, but we do need to push it along, make it happen, right? So, all right. So for anybody that wants to build one of these alter ego characters, you can do that at our link tree. So the researcher will pop that in the chat, and that is linktree/viridescent with a dot between the TR and the EE. Okay, we're gonna go sit by the water for a minute. Take a minute, get up, stretch your legs, take a few breaths, get a drink, and we'll see you on the other side. Aurora, I'm gonna flip it back over to you so we can kind of go into Ladyboss International more directly, talking about structure and all that. But let's talk about the glow piece of all of this.
Yeah, so Chance, I was thinking about, so first of all, Rose, I will say that when I was first doing what you were just now doing about going through my alter ego stuff, I did the same thing where I was like, now, why did I say that? What did I do? And I think it was like maybe the third time I was on a call with one of Chance's, things like this. And before the call, I was like, let me get my story straight. And I actually wrote down notes. And when that time, it was like, oh my God, it was poetry. So don't feel bad that you don't, because I was the same way. I was like, there's so many animals. There's so much. How do I choose? What did I say? So no, I totally get where you're coming from on that.
If I can just jump in and say too, you're talking about the light piece and the nature element is one of the best nature element pieces we've heard from anybody. So yeah, good stuff.
Awesome. So, but Chance, something you were saying a moment ago about the mission of Viridescent and about, being the light in the darkness. And of course, the name of my company is Astrato, which means to illuminate. And of course, we've just heard Rose's light theme, and we're going to continue hearing more about that. I was thinking about something that there was a quote, I hope think of exactly how it goes, but it's something to the effect of, oh, a person pretending to sleep cannot be awakened. A person pretending to sleep cannot be awakened. So if you think about that, there are people who are in the dark, but their eyes have adjusted, and they're not looking for light. They're not looking for answers and a way forward and differences. But there are people in the dark that are, where am I? I know there's something better. I know I can see a change. I know that there's a vision, but I can't see it, either because I don't understand what I'm looking for, or because it hasn't been revealed to me, or because I can see it, but I don't know the path from where I'm at to over there. I feel, it's sort of like that classic, the Indiana Jones scene where he gets to the thing and he looks down and there's no way to get to the door ahead until he looks at it just right, and then there's the bridge, right? So I feel like the theme of light for each of us, I think it has a little bit different manifestation. For me, I want to illuminate the truth about social and environmental issues in business. So there's sort of like an awareness piece, but it's also about illuminating the path one step at a time. So I think about like hiking up a mountain that's it's foggy and you can't really see where you're going, but you can see the ground in front of you. As long as you can see the ground in front of you, you just take one solid step at a time. That's okay, right? So I love the fact that your business and your alter ego contains this element of light. And so you were talking a minute ago about light being something you have to control and manipulate and always chasing it. But the concept of glow is flipped, because you create glow. Glow comes from within, not from without, right? Light comes from without, glow comes from within. So I would love to hear a little bit more on that take, that spin of light and the concept of glow. What makes the women you work with glow, and how do you extract glow? How do you chip away the stuff that's covering up the glow that you know is there?
Oh my goodness. I just love this. I love this. So much. So I had to write down glow comes from within, because that's so beautiful. I've not heard it said like that. So thank you for that, Aurora. So I immediately am taken to this past Saturday when we had an in-person event, which was the first one we've had in a long time, which had me all glowy, because I was just like, oh gosh, people, like I'm an extrovert, right? Probably not surprised by that. And it was, I was a little nervous. I was like, I'm not sure I haven't peopled this hard for a long time. But what was really interesting is that, in this panel conversation, much like we started back in 2017, I could hear these women sharing what was hard for them and how they were able to how they were able to persevere and come out on the other side. And I was looking in the audience and watching different women glowing, whether they were crying or smiling. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, I started to tear up just by that expression of humanity, right? Like, it's not us looking at our phones like, oh, or even reacting here in this virtual space. Like, it's in person. Like, I'm sure you all have heard, like, what's it, like 6 or 8 feet? No, the 6 feet rule is the government rule. 9 feet, something about how far we can be from heart to heart, that the heart actually begins to like feel the other heartbeat, right? And I don't have to tell you, bosses, right? Like when your psyche all like kind of shifted based on who you're visiting or traveling with, or your daughter comes and stays with you or whatever, right? And so there's something really beautiful about the symbiotic nature when humans are together, what community can do for glow. And what I've noticed in the real life events, and even a little in the virtual too, like that humanity that brings us together. It's like, oh, like I feel lighter and I can feel that glow of myself, right? COVID, we're not done with it. During, I'll call deep COVID last winter, I spent a lot of time by myself, table for one, quarantina. I did an artist in residence, like in the middle of the woods. I was in a cabin. I had Wi-Fi, and that was kind of it. And I did not feel glowy, let me just say. And when I did lean into community and foster connections, and when people reached out to me, I was like, ooh, like it lit me up. It literally lit me up. And actually from that space, from that darkness, as I heard both of you, Aurora and Chance, mention, like, this beautiful part of what light looks like when it comes from the darkness. I mean, that's of this app that I'm building, is that I was in a super dark place during COVID. Also in 2017, when I started my business, like a lot of times we have to go inside and feel all those fields and be very dark before that light can like begin to glow from us. And something else that popped into my head is, as you started to mention this thing that's internal, I wanted to share with you all, in regards to different animals. I don't know if you all have ever heard of the Musk Deer, M-U-S-K. This is the deer that is chiefly responsible for making musk, which is what we put in a lot of our colognes. It's that like more pheromone, like deep bass. Sujata's like, oh yeah, some musk. So I was actually like flipping through the radio, like old fashioned radio, was trying to find some pop music, whatever. And I come across this, what I attest to be like maybe an Indian accent. I wasn't really sure where the man was from, but he was like, it was all of a sudden very clear. And the radio was, I can find some pop rock, but also lots of, where I was living at the time, lots of like Billy Graham training, like lots of gospel, like, like Bible stuff, and not exactly my flavor. oh, what's this guy talking about? This does not sound like the typical like preacher from the pulpit kind of sermon. And and I could hear it loud and clear. I'm like, I'm turning this up. He's like, and so really, you think about the musk deer. The musk deer spends all of its life running through the forest with its nose out going, what is that smell? Oh my God, what is that smell? Is it over here? Is it over there? Oh, is it with that deer? And as it turns out, where the nose of the deer ends is right here. Right below that is where the glands for the musk live. And so the musk, this beautiful, beautiful smell, is actually coming from the deer. And the deer spends its whole life trying to figure out, where is that amazing thing coming from? And so I think about that all the time relative to glow. And as you say, like the glow comes from within. It's like, if I can help activate that within myself and then show other people, you said, Aurora, like, you know, I don't actually always have it together. Like sometimes it looks like I do, and that's great. But a lot of times I'm like, let's get this shit together, you know? And I'm going, okay, I got this.
I love it. That is just so fantastic. This conversation lights me up, honestly. That's a beautiful thing. And, you know, I think there really is something powerful about the dynamics and the interaction with other people that can light people up. You said you're an external processor. I rarely hear people say that. I say it about myself all the time. So I'm with you on that. Right. Which means, of course, sometimes, you know, you have to say a bunch of stuff that everybody else is like, wait, what? I'm sorry, what are you talking about? But you're like, oh, that was brilliant, because you just needed to like connect all those dots. But I find that, to me, it is a gift when somebody allows me to do that. Like friends like Chance. Chance lets me sometimes just, you know, ramble and do my thing until I connect those dots. And
Likewise,
it is
friend.
like a light. You know, it's like a, you know, like a light just flipped on. It's like, oh, I can see that now, right? So I think that while yes, sometimes we generate our own light, need other people to sort of fan the flames, you know, like kindle the fire to get that going. So lots of, I'm probably overdoing the light here, but I just think that it's such a beautiful theme, and it does keep the tone of all of this very positive. When I say this world we're trying to change, these negativities we're trying to fight against, these, you know, voices in our heads from our childhoods that we're trying to drown out, like all of that can overtake. But the more the light is shining, the more that stuff is drowned out, and it doesn't, the heaviness of it, the darkness of it, can't bring us down. So it does have to be something that we are continually plugging into. And so I love the fact that it sounds like, I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the specifics of what you offer, but it sounds like you offer a platform where sort of illumination that can happen on a regular basis. So Chance, I don't know if you have something else you want to add to this, but I would love to hear a little bit more about sort of technically what is the product that you do and deliver, and how it works and how people can find it.
Yeah, and Rose, this is a good, I think, place to go to the Backstage Pass as well. And we will actually have some free Backstage Passes available to anybody that subscribes to our email list today. So please feel free to do that. And if you're already subscribed, we may just have one or two to hand out along the way too. But I think a really good transition for that. And we're going to go back to the light because I have something to add. But let's talk Ladyboss and Backstage Pass.
Awesome. Yes. And so that idea, I want to touch on the light. I'll maybe use the light to bridge us to the Backstage Pass, because something we haven't said is not just the glow, but the glow up, right? And so we use the word a lot, like, let's glow up the world. I think this is the first day I'm not wearing like one. I have my Ladyboss hat on, but we have these like hoodies and these sweatshirts that's like, where you glowing, Ladyboss? Or let's glow this place up, right? And so it's using this verb of like, you know, to glow or glowing or were you glowing? Like I like cheeky copy. But also I really like to ask women, like, where do you feel your best? And how do you feel most inspired? And if you don't, or when you don't, what do you do? And if you don't have an answer for that, come backstage. Or if you do have an answer for that, come backstage. And so basically what the Backstage Pass is an answer to, you know, how can we as women really glow the world up? How can we really glow forward in a more equitable and just world? I want it to not just make a community place where it's like, yeah, let's talk about that. Because the panel discussions that we originally had back in real life, starting in 2017, that was a beautiful container. It bounced from venue to venue. It was just a passion project. I had not monetized it. I was really busy running my other business, and I didn't even really think about it as a business. I thought about it as a way to genuinely connect with women because I really needed it. And then I found more women were like, too, yes, me too, right? And so I've built this virtual space where we can kind of bring that same element of in-person, even though there's nothing like in-person, but have access to these different women that are in different stages of their career and use them as sounding boards, right? Use them as a resource of tools and different conversations and different, in this case, we have a whole area of commerce where people can purchase coaching. They can purchase support to have their social media handled. They can purchase opportunities to set up their business from an LLC to an S Corp, to change the way that they have their accounting set up, to work with a different accountant. Like I said, I was called Little Lady and Kiddo by a number. I'm on my 4th accountant now, and I've only been in business a dozen years. That feels like a lot of to years in business ratio. But now I'm working with a female accountant. So I hope that, we have a little bit better track record. But what I've done is I've not only brought together a community of women who really wants and needs and sees the value of leaning into each other, but some of those women have the tools and resources that some of us don't have, right? And that we need to say, like, for example, old school Rolodex or Yellow Pages, or even day Angie's List, where you would go through and find one of these service providers. In this case, I've vetted them and I've made sure that they are, ethically and spiritually and all of the good things. They're like a lady boss through and through, that are here for the work that we need to do as women. Because really, you can't just put pink on it and say, this is feminist, or now we're doing better because, like, I got lipstick on, but I'm wearing my lady boss suit. Like, okay, yes. And we also have to change. In this last week even, have really been working with how I balance my femininity and my masculinity. Because sometimes the words that come out of my mouth, I think are nice, but they're not as nice as they could be, because I'm trying to be a lady boss and we got to get things done. And I need to, and who wants to be nice? That's boring. But also, having grace and having patience, even when the shit hits the fan, right? And so we've got coaches that are working with you on mindset. We've got people who are there just to support in the general lounge area. So there's 2 spaces. Let me kind of clarify. There's a lounge area where you come backstage on this app and you just see affirmations, you see different podcasts to check out, you see different ways that you can potentially collaborate and be featured on said podcasts, or you can be featured on the blog. So all these women that are like, hey, what about this? Or where can I find out more about this? And that's in the lounge area. And then when you go to the mall area, or what we call shopper, that's where you'll find this kiosk of all these different storefronts that are owned and operated by women, directly from women right there on the app. That's a little peek backstage.
A little peek. Well, I think we might have to get a few people backstage so they can feel and experience it, right? And glow, I suppose. Wow. I think I'd be really interested in kind of what your journey has been in. What has been difficult about this, right? So there's a lot of energy and vibe and, all that. I think, when people get in and kind of experience it, I can imagine that they really, really resonate well and get that energy, and then it's all go. How is like getting people backstage? How has that journey been? And what are some of your walls, barriers that you've faced in bringing people kind of into the fold?
Oh my gosh, Chance, such a great question. I mean, we're just about a month and a half old, so like not even holding up our baby neck yet, right? So my own tempo is on it to be, a full grown tree, and it's like a sprout. It's like nothing grows overnight. I was like, oh, right. So managing my own terrierism, right? My terrierness, but also that, this isn't something that, while there are other people doing similar things, that we feel a groundswell of these things perking up, something that has been done before. And I have to give a shout out to my girl Sydney, a younger sister from another mister, and just a whole group of family that I have become a part of over the last 5 years. And I was lamenting, like, people just don't get it. Oh my God, my copy is all messed. People aren't understanding. And Sid said, well, Rose, this is great. This is great news. I'm like, how is this great news? I need people to come backstage. And she said, well, people don't know what it is because it's not been done before. So this is awesome. You're like you're trailblazing, you're groundbreaking. I'm like, okay, well, okay, yeah. Okay. So I felt kind of better for a second, but anything, it's a draft. Everything is constantly being like trimmed down and shaved and readjusted and rewritten. And so I've had to be really clear with my messaging. Thing is, and one of my favorite ways that we've solved that so far is by creating these fun little infographics that are riffs off of other well-known social platforms. For example, we've got this little feminist Facebook logo, which Facebook didn't really love because it's their logo, but it says feminist under it, and you look, you're like, wait, what? Right? And it makes people think twice. Like, yeah, it's like a feminist book. That's what it is, right? They're like, oh, okay, I got it. It's like a matriarchal MySpace. So we literally have like the 3 little, emoji things from old days of MySpace and matriarchal MySpace. You know what I mean? Some people are like, I don't even know what MySpace is. And you're like, that's fine. But a Ladyboss LinkedIn. Yeah, it's okay. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it won't. I still love it because you can play music on it, right? But yeah, the Ladyboss LinkedIn, we literally took the LinkedIn logo and we did a little spin on it. And I think technically, because I love to dig into law and little like IP things, like impersonator, technically this is okay. Actually, they hate it, but technically it's okay. And what it's actually done for us is given people context to explain what this thing is. It's not Facebook, but it's like Facebook in that you now have a vision of like the scrolling thing, but you don't have like racist Uncle Jerry or like cousin Ashley talking about her kid's 3rd dirty diaper today or whatever Facebook has in store, right? Like it is curated for women in business by women in business. So then you're like, oh, so it's like LinkedIn. Well, it's like LinkedIn, but it's a Ladyboss LinkedIn. And the way we do Ladybossing is we have our core values. We collaborate, we elevate, and we inspire in an inclusive and diverse way. Oh, okay, now I want to know more. And so the challenge has been doing something very new, having no context, and then creating context and being okay crossing like that spot of like, okay, what are we doing? Okay, how do we explain it? Like, I love that bridge, but the part right before you get to the, oh God, do I even know what I'm doing? Right? Because when someone's like, I don't get it, even if 5 other people say they got it, I'm really worried about that one person not getting it. Okay, well, let me go back to the drawing board. Oh, Rose, not everybody's going to get the message. No, I need everybody to get the message. If they choose not to come backstage, that's okay. But I really want to make sure our copy and that our marketing and all of the stuff that we're putting out there, that you know what it is. And that way also nobody's confused. Like, oh, why are they over here talking about vagina health? Like, I don't even say that word. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's what we talk about. We don't talk about that all day long, but we do talk about that because we don't think it's a bad word. And we want to make sure that women feel supported to talk about their health, and other things along that nature. Just making sure that we're really crystal clear about what we're doing so that we are attracting the right group of people and that we don't have any confusion for both them and for our team, right? And what we're working on.
But, something I would interject here is that even doing something that is sort of a known model, right? So I do courses, I do coaching, I do consulting. To me, it feels pretty school. But really, how many people out there, how many professionals have ever actually paid for coaching and really understand what a coaching relationship means and what they should get out of it and what they should put into it? right? Like it's something that so few people, especially younger people, because it's kind of it's an expense, right? And so, I've worked with different types of coaches over the years, and I have to say they just all kind of came into my life in these sort of random ways. I never went out seeking coaching until it became something I'd done 3 times. And then I was like, oh, I need a coach again. It's that time in my life again, right? And I know like, oh, it's going to have an expense, and this is kind of what I do. But I think there's still so many people out there that even younger people who still haven't developed a full comfort with taking an online course and making the most of it, right? I mean, like really actively participating in education, content, whatever the package is, whether it's a course, social media feed, or whatever, it's content that is delivered as education and learning experience. And most people are passive learners instead of active learners. So it's almost like you're trying to flip part of what you're trying to do, and I'm trying to do, and I know Chance is trying to do, is get people, and Sam, I should shout out to Sam because I know he's trying to do the same thing, is how do we like get people to actively recognize and engage in, you want to achieve these things in life, you have to constantly be learning, and you have to get coaching. And I think that we still aren't in a place, those of us who do this, we live in a bubble and we think that everyone else is doing it. I can tell you, I've gotten these Facebook ads that say, I launched a course and made 5,000 in 1 week. And I'm like, like that doesn't happen in the real world. And so, yeah, you must be selling a course on how to apply lipstick, because I'm not having that happen, right? So I think that we, the space, have to recognize the fact that we are not only pushing a message about feminism, lady entrepreneurship, sustainable procurement, green teams, whatever it is that we're doing, we also have to recognize the fact that so much of the market still doesn't really understand this model of courses, content, coaching, mentorship, and the stuff that we are offering to the world. So this stuff is hard to sell because it's not like the typical thing people are used to pulling off a shelf. Like I'm going to go on Amazon and buy a book. Like that's the model people are used to. I'm going to buy a book. If I read it, I'm something out of it. If I don't, that's on me. I'm going to feel bad that I never got around to reading that book. But what we're offering is a different kind of experience. And so I know for me, Rose, I had to give a lot away just to get people to like even begin to understand. And I just have to share one little quick thing, and then I'll pass it back to you because I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. I've been trying to get a group coaching thing started. And with one of my courses, I clawed and scratched and gave some freebies away. And I finally, last week, launched my first group. Because I'm like, if people just pay a little bit each, it's worth my time to do the group. So I set up this 6-week program, and last week was the first one. And I was basically, almost every one of the people in it paid nothing for the coaching. They paid for the course and nothing for the coaching. And so I'm like, Monday morning, I'm like, are people even going to show up? Because I can tell on the platform, they're not in the videos. They haven't really, every single one of them showed up. Every single one of them was like, wow, this is so amazing. I can't believe I'm like in the company of these people. This is so cool. I've learned something. They're emailing me, and it's like, just, if you'll just show up, just, I promise you it's worth it. I know that all of that probably resonates with you. I would love to hear a little bit more about like sort of your story in like just those like, come on, take a little taste. I promise it's going to be addictive in a good way. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your journey in that regard.
Yes, I love this. I love this so much, Aurora, because it is, especially when I can tell how passionate you are about the work you do. And similarly, me, and I think everybody probably here is so passionate about what they're doing. And it's different than just buying a book from Lord Bezos, right? It's different because you're interacting with humans. But I think that's the important part, particularly in what you're doing with the group versus one-on-one, is the power of community. Again, I'll never get tired saying that. Is so strong. I've been in one-on-one coaching or therapy or individual stuff for a long, long time, but I've just started to participate in more group stuff because that's I hate to say it like this, but that's what I'm selling, right? I'm selling access to community. I'm selling because I know that's one thing we do need, right? And if COVID hasn't taught us anything, let us know that like being around other like-minded folks is super, super important for us to feel seen and to feel valued and to feel hopeful, right? When we're just like plugged into the doom scrolling and we're like that's not helpful. And so I think the power of community and doing things in a group is enough in its own volition. But a lot of times, to your point, Aurora, is a lot of people don't necessarily know that is true. They might feel it sometimes like, oh, I don't know why I had such a great time with this thing. It's like, well, look at, there were all these other people that were like validating you, and you can say, oh yes, I feel like that, or oh, I've heard that before, right? Or oh, I hadn't thought about it. And so that collective energy is, it's palpable. It helps to like encourage people to come back. I mean, in all of our clubhouse rooms, that's the feedback I always, oh wow, the energy is so great. Like I never want to miss a room with you all because it's just, I feel so inspired. It's like, great, right? And okay, so if you've gotten a bite of that, can you please come, can I make you a whole meal, right? And I'm not making it for free. You have to pay for the meal, but that's the cool part, right? Like I care so much about how you're glowing, Lady Boss. Like, let me give you a little extra sauce on there. Let me make sure that, you know, you got it helping if you need it. And, you know, it does cost, but also you're taking care of, you're fed, right? And so what my challenge is not only conveying to folks that the value is there as long as they experience it, right? Like to your point, Aurora, is like, just let me show you a little bit. And you're like, oh yes. And being confident that once they see it and they feel it, because on the flip of that, when people don't experience it, or they're not willing to come back, or they're, you know, available for whatever reason, then I'm like, oh, well, they don't need it. They don't need it. I'm like, yes, they do. And this goes to our original topic at the top of the hour, where it's like, you know, I have had my own challenges of self-worth and being fit for this job and being here for it, just because that's the human experience. I think everybody has that. But then as we're building something that we see, like I feel I'm so passionate and I know the world needs this because I needed it so much. I still need it. And I see women daily going, oh my gosh, I needed this. So when one person doesn't see it, I'm like, oh, come on, now I know, please. And so I have to balance that, right? Like that I'm not just like, let me tell you again in a different way. Let me tell you again in a different way. Let me tell you. And they're like, why is this chick keep sliding in my DMs? Like, no, you do need it. You just don't know you don't need it, you know, or that you need it. And the last thing I'll say about this is I had a woman, I just love how the world works. I had a woman that I met last week at a salon appointment, and we immediately connected, and I said, hey, I'm going to invite you to this event because I really, you know, she's like got a master's, but she's not really using it, but she wants to like evolve her career, but she and she just kind of feels stuck. I said, will you please come to this event? Because I feel like you're going to feel really held and inspired, and I'm with you. Like, just come through. So she made it to like the second half. She's like, sorry, I'm so late. But when I got there, I knew I was supposed to be there. I'm like, great, good. That's what I'm talking about. And let me give you a pass and come backstage. Like, so now I'm like, here's this, now here's this. And she's like, well, what's this about? And I'm like, well, it's like that thing you just experienced in real life, but it's virtual. Well, I don't have time for another app. I was like, well, then get rid of another garbage app, because this is what you said you needed, right? And this is where like I could sell ice to an Eskimo, but at the same time, I care about this woman. She told me that she has all these skills, she has all these tools, but yet she's like not making any money. She doesn't know what she's doing with her life. I'm like, please come back, because you're not the only one. And part of the reason we get stuck is that we think we're the only one, and to see community and to feel that. So I messaged her yesterday. I said, did you go backstage? She said, no, I'm going to, Rose. I'm going to. I said, okay, I'm just a terrier. I'm just a terrier.
Oh, this is amazing. You know, and all of this is weaving together a really wonderful thread, I think, for a lot of the people that listen to our work and in entrepreneurship, being kind of a sustainability champion. I think a lot of us as sustainability people have been taking the pandemic very, very seriously and being very, very careful. And I know for me, returning to an in-person trade show this week, I was reminded like, wow, there are so many people that are working on all these problems. And I think it's really important for us to have that, certainly, but it also, the virtual things, the communities and the things that you're doing, and I know you kind of mix those things, Rose, where you go to places and you set up little like kind of cohorts and get-togethers and things like that, right? So you're mixing them really nicely. But I think that the virtual space is so overloaded with stuff that what's happening is that people are ending up not getting to a place that is healthy and helpful for them. They're just getting blasted by stuff constantly in the virtual world. And so I think it's a really healthy reminder to people, go find your community, curate your own experience. And so I love your like, no, hey, you should be here, join us, come with us, because we got you, right? We've got you. And I know that's a lot of what we're trying to do ourselves. It's really, really important. Okay, so I want to do kind of a quick reset, and then we're going to transition to part 2 of the conversation. We're going to welcome everybody here in the live audience to come up and join us. And we're going to just kind of sit and talk about empowering the female leaders and lady bosses of the world. So a couple of quick things. So for anybody that is tuned in live today or is listening on demand, please note that if you subscribe to our email experience, we have backstage passes to hand out to help you kind of get through that door and into the world of Ladyboss International. So that can be done at our link tree. So it's linktree/viridescence with a dot between the TR and the EE. And if you subscribe, we will send you an email with a link so that you can get access. Okay, so we're gonna go sit by the ocean for a minute, listen to some waves, keep an eye out for the brown pelican who makes an appearance. This is Mission Beach in San Diego, California. So we've got a couple of moderators in the audience with us today who I'd love to just bring up on stage, and we'll pin you to the camera feed and have you come up and join us.
Hi, I'm Sujata, and I own a company called Beach Sandy, and I make beach and coastal lifestyle products. And I'm really trying to get involved in sustainability in the area of the plastic pollution problem in regards to the ocean. And it's a problem that has many layers to it, and I keep learning about new layers. But I think it's something that overwhelms people when they think about it, so they don't think about it. And all I'm trying to do through my brand is just build awareness, especially to moms, maybe to be mindful of what they bring to the beach with their children. Like maybe Legos is not a good option, or if they're drinking Capri Sun, make sure that plastic is taken away so it's not left to be floating around for years to come. And also, if they can, just try to do one thing, whatever that one thing is, in terms of making a change to contribute to this problem. Like, for example, in my case, I changed from plastic shampoo and conditioner bottles to soap, hair shampoo, and soap conditioner. So every time I use that when I wash my hair, I mean, I know it's not a massive difference in comparison to the problem, but I'm doing at least one thing, and I feel good every time I know that I'm not buying another shampoo bottle. And after doing that, I am looking around at my house and seeing what I can change. So I think that once you start with that one thing and you feel good about it, then you can start thinking about other things. So I'm just trying to get this type of a message out to people, and I'm using my brand to do it. And that's pretty much it.
But would really love to have a conversation about female empowerment. And I think that one of the things I think would be really great to talk a little bit about too is what can the non-lady bosses of the world do, Rose, right, to help support and partner with the amazing work that you're doing? Because obviously you're speaking to and for the lady bosses of the world, right? But this is a collective, and we are trying to build a sustainable world. And I love this idea of a women-led kind of world. I often cite this. There's a book I read that was talking about the history of coal, of all things. And it was talking about how in the early days of developing the steamboat and coal-fired energy sources, women were the ones to kind of speak up and say, like, is that a good idea? That black smoke pouring into the air, that probably isn't good for our children, like, wow, right? All that time back, you think about that. And I've often said, it's like, if society had done a better job of being women forward and women led, or at least listen, if nothing else, right? We might not be in the same place in all sorts of areas, including, and I know this is kind of crazy to say, climate change, truly. There's all of the things we need as humans, the diversity we need, the perspectives we need, the wisdom and experience that we need, just from our amazing Indigenous friends, brothers, sisters, and all, right? We have everything we need right here to solve all these problems, and we always had it. So now let's build forward and let's make this thing happen in a way to address climate change, poverty, equity things, all these different things. So would really love kind of your perspective on that, Rose, and just an open conversation. So if anybody, I don't know, Sujata, you've been sitting in listening mode and enjoying, but maybe we'll have Rose, if you kind of want to dig into that, and we'll get anybody up on stage that wants to be, yeah.
Yes, love it. Love it. I love this because I think this is really, important component of why I'm doing this work. And I think why you all are doing this work. And yes, lady bosses, for those who identify as lady and boss, it is a gendered word. It is all, I also think it's a little bit of an oxymoron because, anybody who's paying attention to history, like ladies haven't been able to have a bank account or drive or own a property up until the last century, which is kind of horseshit, if you ask me, right? And then we talk about our experience of our ancestors, right? So the lady boss name is chosen specifically. And we also, lady bosses need the support of all of the people, the men people, the they people, right? Like we are coming together, pushing this initiative forward, because I think what you said, Chance, is brilliant, pointing to like the mamas who are like, is that smut okay? Like, I know about that, right? And there are also some really brilliant men people that are environmentalists in the histories of the world. But I do feel that a lot of times over the course of our experience as humans, the women's voices has been squelched so that commerce and capitalism and consuming can go forward, right? And I don't want to get too political, but I do stay pretty active with my ongoing, current events and my old political junkie habit. I don't like to get too poetic on that stuff, but it charges me up and it makes me a little upset that we still have many issues that we do have relative to climate change, relative to social justice, right? Like you'd think that after the 60s, we had to figure it out a little bit more on the social justice, but looks like we haven't, right? And so, and I want to also be careful to say that just putting women in positions of power, we can't just put pink on it and say, okay, we fixed it, right? Like we have to lean into Because there are also feminists that are definitely of the patriarchy, which totally F's with my mind. I'm like, what did she just say? No, right? And so really, really experiencing our existence as humans and being cool with like, I have some masculine energy, right? I have some feminine energy, and how can I balance that? And how can I show that is balanced to you and to you, and say, oh, I see that in you, right? And so when we think about activating people who might not be a lady boss to do this work, maybe they don't want to come backstage, but it's like, I can still ask a man, like, where are you glowing? Like, what lights you up? How do you care about yourself? How do you care about your surroundings? How do you care about what's outside your door? And how do you care about like 3 blocks over there, right? Like, this points back to our conscious capitalism and how we can be more active in how we spend our time, how we spend our money, how we spend our energy. I mean, like, that's really, I always tell my sister this, like, oh, actually, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. Like, actually, all we have is time. That's all we have. All this other stuff is just cake. How we spend it, where we spend it, with whom we spend it. Like, those are the choices. Time is always around us. I personally don't have enough time. I want more of it, but really, it's just there, right? It's how we spend it that is the currency of it. And so I like the idea of actually activating more folks that aren't lady bosses to like, that's why I said yes to this conversation. I was like, great, yeah, definitely. When my team's like, so when I pitch you on podcast, you only want to talk to lady bosses? No, I want to talk to all the people who care about a woman-led world, because as I think you all agree, like, when we have women at the helm, we see the opportunity for not only the power dynamic to shift and hopefully be more level, but like, it's also opening the door for that person and that person. And it I think has much more possibility to be good for all of us versus, okay, women forward, like, sorry guys, now it's your turn to sit down. No. And I think that's a wild disservice that happened with other waves of feminism, where, you know, it's like, oh, we're so angry, we're so pissed at the patriarchy. Oh yeah, girl, I am pissed at the patriarchy too. And we can't fight a fire with fire, right? I'm also still learning this. But a word that I came up with the other day, I think I came up with it, maybe somebody said it before, but I was like, okay, like, toppling the patriarchy, smashing the patriarchy, even so many of our words, right? Like, apart and fast, or like groundbreaking or trailblazing. These are all words that are actually pretty intensely masculine, right? And in some cases, like yesterday, we're like, okay, let's divide and conquer. I was like, that's actually probably not a phrase we should use. I feel like that's probably from like old school colonizing. Like, maybe let's not say divide and conquer, right? Like, we say, like, let's go out there and rape and pillage them. Like, no, right? Like, we probably shouldn't say that. And so I just about how our words and our actions can be inclusive to make people feel and know that this work in putting more women at the helm isn't just to like say need to sit down, or isn't at all to say men need to sit down. It's like, we all need to stand up so that we can be stronger together.
Aurora, over to you, and I'm going to sit back and listen for a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chance, and thank you for your comments, Rose. You know, I think one of the things, the latter part of what you were saying, it reminds me of when I was learning Spanish in college. And I learned Spanish like to the extent that I was like living and working in Latin America and giving presentations in Spanish. So because I was actually like living in Mexico and giving presentations, I had to constantly do a quick pause of like, oh, that little like euphemism or that little saying, is that going to translate? And I would sometimes turn to the native and be like, so in English we would say it like this, and they would be like, well, the closest here would be blah blah blah, right? Like another thing. And then there was the fact that like some words would be okay to say in Mexico, but when I went to Argentina, they were like, no, you cannot use that word here. You know, so it would be like, and so I think it's like language sensitivity and translation. And you're right, I use a lot of these terms, like I find myself in the last year just starting to stop and pause and be like, why exactly do I say that way? Is that, I wonder if I'm offending anybody when I do that? So there's a little bit of tiptoeing, but I think just if everybody can, if the man people, the they people, the she people, if all of us could be a little more sensitive to the fact that we all develop a language based on our heritage, our education, our industry. We use terms, we use sayings, we have accents, we have all these things. And so and feminism and masculinity also play into that, and the historical patriarchy, or the sort of battle and conflict, and all of that, of course, is woven into our language. And I think at the same time we have to respect the fact that people are on autopilot when they speak, so we can't judge every word that comes out of their mouth as women who are a little more heightened in our awareness. But for everybody, be a little more conscious of the words. So I would love to take a moment to shift the gear a little bit, but I'm still answering Chance's question about how can others support women. And I think it's very important, and this was something that really came out of reading the confidence code, but also just other conversations I've been having over the last several years. And that is for men particularly to be aware, and men struggle with this too, but for men to be especially aware of how much women deal with the imposter syndrome. And Rose, so much of what you were saying in the first half of this conversation, especially the first like 20 or so minutes, I was thinking like, oh yes, we have to get to that imposter syndrome conversation. One of the things that I have noticed, and sometimes you don't notice it in your own self, you see it in other people, is how much women hedge their words. So they add in all of these words, like instead of saying like, I'm a strong leader, they say something like, well, I try to my team and I do my best to try to, and there's all these words, and they use 1,000 to say what they could say in 100 words, because so much of it is, what if I'm called out for not being like, what if somebody says you're not actually a good leader? Okay, so I'm gonna hide behind all these extra words, so you don't think that I'm really saying I'm a good leader. I'm kind of trying to, so Rose, I don't know if that resonates with you, or Sujata, please, definitely want to hear more from you, and maybe this resonates with you in your work, right? So I think that imposter syndrome thing is very real, and for those, especially younger men who grew up in a world that was just laid out for them, white men particularly, you may not even recognize that this is a real thing because it's just so natural for you to walk into a space and own it. But for some of us who need a little lending hand, help us with our language. Like, rephrase what you heard us say in direct, true words. So if you hear a woman kind of hedging around her talents, repeat it back to her in 10 words that are clear and direct and confident, and let her receive and own that. So I don't know if that resonates with anybody, but I think that's a very real thing for me and some of the younger women entrepreneurs that I mentor.
I can jump in on that. I think a lot of that also stems how or what your ethnic background may be, even if you're raised in Europe or America, right? Like, for example, I was born in the UK and I was raised here, but my parents are first generation Asian Indian from India. So the messaging for females that went along with that was just insane. I think I was just the oddball wild one. So I turned out and just really carved my own path. But a lot of families in my immediate and extended family, they sort of, I would say they kind of followed the path, the females, of what they're supposed to do, is being part of that culture. But what's really interesting is now, so my father is one of the elders, and he's actually responsible for the whole generation now being successful and being in this country. He came to America back in the 60s, but he was very poor. He came from a village in India, the youngest of 5 siblings, and just had a dream of making it by education. So his virtue is education, and that's what he believes in. So long story short, it's because of him, like we're here and the whole generation now. So he did have 4 other siblings, and then back then everyone had 5 kids. So there's a lot of people. So I am now the one out of the generation that everyone looks up to, because I'm the elder, the new generation. And I'm also the one that has had the most interesting path, fearless and just doing what I've always wanted to do and not worrying about what other people have to say. So I think that's where of that comes from for many people. And you may not even know it. You may, I mean, if you look around and think about a friend or someone you have, and maybe sometimes you wonder, like, why do they think that? Or why do they feel like that? You know, if you take a moment to maybe think about, you know, their parents or a sibling or someone they know on a deeper layer, that may answer some of those questions. And I also just wanted to add to Rose's point when we were talking about females and, you know, males and females and the roles. I mean, I think things got messed up a long time ago, where it was like, okay, you have to do this and you have to do that, and you're good at this and you're good at that. Where I do think that inherently males and females do have different strengths, they have different intuition systems, but it is humans or humanity that put these rules on, like, you know, who should be what. And I think that maybe women sort of got the shaft because they were the ones that had the children, and they always had to protect those children. That came first, right? So I think that they did that at a cost of anything anyone said, as long as their children were protected. And then under the guise of that, they were kept down. They were kept on the side, in the cave, whatever you want to call it, you know? And I think that's what happened. And lastly, I would like to say, in terms of women and business, I was at a Inc. conference several years ago here in Manhattan prior to COVID. And Kevin O'Leary, AKA Mr. Wonderful, was one of the speakers at that conference. And he was the only male there at the female conference. And he said that, I just wanted to say that over and over again, women are proving to be better executives and better decision makers. That's why, you know, for the past few years, after realizing that with all the data collected, there's a lot of money out there for women. People want to give women money because they are believing in them in another way than has ever been understood. And yeah, that's my share. Thank you for listening to me.
Sujata, I think what you just shared is so important, and I want to piggyback onto that last part of you know, women. And as it turns out, women are fantastic business people because, you know, of a variety, a long list of things. And you know, all humans have their different skill sets, right? But women can really provenly be really wonderful at not just being a leader, but in roles of business leadership. And that gets me really fired up because, you know, and I have to be careful, like how fired up I get about it, because I'm like, okay, let's go, right? Because any group that has been told that they're not allowed to sit at the table, right? It's not just women, it's people of color, it's our Black and brown, our indigenous folks, right? Like if you weren't a white man, there really wasn't room at the table. And so that terrier in me sometimes comes out like, okay, well, you better make room. We're gonna build our own damn table over here, right? And I think that ferocity, and sometimes it can be emotional, there can be tears with that. Women get categorized as like, well, is she gonna be able to do that? She's so emotional, she's so upset. It's like, the thing is you kept us in the damn cave for so long that like we're really ready to come on out to the boardroom now, right? And some of the women that I know, some OG lady bosses that have been, you know, integral in my growth and launching this app, and who I hope to one day soon ask to be part of, I'm not going to call it a board because that's really boring, and more of a council, more of a circle, a little witchy, ask them to sit up, because they have been collectively, you know, one of the only women in the boardroom on the Chicago board. And she's, you know, over 6 feet tall, and all these guys, you know, they're like, oh, you mean the lesbian? I'm like, no, I mean the woman at the table? Like, why does that have to do with anything? And by the way, she doesn't date women. Why would you, you know? Or another lady boss who has been a professor at many business schools in Chicago, and you know, she herself is actually a bit timid, but she has this, like, in her speech, she's English isn't her first language, so she's always, you know, curious that she's saying it right. To your point, Aurora, like, well, you know, I just, and I'm like, all due respect, Lena, like I have so much respect for the work you're doing. And I wish that I could be a fly on the wall in some of your classrooms, because any student that is in your classroom is lucky to have this incredible amount of knowledge, right? And so it's very interesting to me to see other women who have succeeded in business in very male dominated areas and still are proving themselves, right? And so balancing that tenacity to, like, you know, versus like, oh yeah, thanks, you gave me this much, I'll take this. I'm like, no, give her some more space, you know, like that's why I always call myself the hype girl, because I'm like, okay, she's coming through, make room, we got a lady boss, yep, she's got a couple, yep, we're gonna keep moving, did you get her rider? Okay, let's keep going. And I'll keep doing that. I'll do it for myself, and I'll do it for every woman, child, and for that matter, human. But, you know, getting back to the point of, you know, sort of this women-led world, you know, I'm from Chicago, right? Everybody's a guy. Oh yeah, hey guys. And I know that many cultures use guys, but, you know, for example, French, right? I'm sure they have some term that's more masculine than feminine. But the plural is more like yous, right? Like in the South, in Georgia, it's y'all, right? Which is kind of like guys, but it's y'all. It's not all you men's, right? Because if I walked into a boardroom or a dinner party or a soccer game and was like, hey, ladies, and it was all men, they'd be like, why does she call me that? But yet we are supposed to be totally comfortable to call guys. And it is my pet freaking peeve when I get called a guy, right? And I'm from Chicago, right? So I started to, like, call people, you know, my ladies or gals. And I know now it's like, what's your pronoun and what's proper and all this stuff, which I appreciate. But in Chicago, I got a guy. I'm like, well, I got a gal, you know, like I want to normalize the fact that I'm not a guy. I am not a guy, and I would like to not be called a guy. Right. So that's just my take on all of the pronouns.
Can I add something in here? I wanted to add that, you know, if males and females can just work together, I'm sure we've all seen examples of these relationships. It's very powerful, actually, because you've got two completely different minds coming at it from a different perspective. And this is in everything. This is even, like, you know, when you think about not only business, but maybe children or dealing with a bigger issue, each one is coming with a different perspective because of their strengths, you know, their wiring and their way of thinking. And, you know, if we could get to a place where, like, males didn't have a chip on their shoulder, females didn't have a chip on their shoulder because of all of this past garbage, then imagine the unity of like the minds and what could really be accomplished. Or, for example, if you're in a workplace and it's not like, you know, okay, there's a female that's got a chip on her shoulder, so she's going to be a bitch to everyone in there. Or there's a male that needs to, like, just be dominant and, like, flex his muscle. No, what if everyone could just be like, okay, hey, we are, like, on a level playing field and we're going to come. I mean, I don't know, maybe some of them need help with their communication skills or their way of getting the message out. But if they do, you know, what I'm trying to convey, which I hope everyone understands, that is very powerful.
Chance here, if I could jump in and just say, you know, I just love the passion from the three of you, and I can imagine putting on my white guy cap, right? There's somebody probably that's going to listen to this on demand podcast or video and you know, and kind of like, I don't know how I feel about it. Push through that, listen, like sit and listen and hear this, because the frustration is okay, right? We all get frustrated. And, you know, I always kind of smirk or, I don't know, roll my eyes a little bit when it's this thing, Rose, you spoke to, women like being told like, oh, you know, you're too emotional, or they're going to be too emotional, or whatever, right? Like, who's more emotional than men, right? Like, I mean, men are quick trigger, hot-headed sometimes, right? And these are all like stereotypes, and none of these things apply to every person all the time, right? But I think it is pretty silly when we put this stuff on other people, where it's like, it just is really frustrating. And so like, if you're listening to this and it's making you a little bit uncomfortable, I'd almost say good, and push through that. Don't leave, hang around, listen, and hear what they're saying, and put yourself in Aurora and Sujata and Rose's shoes, and think about it for a little bit. Because what I love about what we're talking about here is like venting frustration, but we're talking about how diversity is our strength, right? There's so many amazing perspectives. And one of the things that I've been listening to and I'm becoming really fascinated by is this idea of regenerative leadership. And regeneration is all about unwinding or healing or allowing things to get back to where they were supposed to be or where they once were. And certainly it's very nature term, right? Healing the earth or letting the earth heal itself, but it really applies to humans here too. And what I would say to the dudes in the room is, if you listen to women and if you are often led by women, it will make you better. It will make you better. So if you want to be selfish, be selfish. It'll make you better too, right? That's so just, you know, to add that to those 2 cents. I don't know, just listen, please just listen and be patient, and don't be so sensitive.
I'd like to add on to that. Actually, please do be so sensitive, because from my perspective, when I see men being sensitive or vulnerable, and different than being like hot-headed or like emotionally reactive, because I can also be like that, right? That's just like, it's hard to get out of that space. It's hard to connect. I saw Aurora had mentioned empathy is the way forward from the messiest problems, but like, I feel empathy for emotionality when I see it, where I'm like, oh, that person crying on the side of are you okay? You need something? You know, like, that shows our humanity, right? And so I think being emotional is okay. It's just when that emotionality there's like a response that is unkind or hurtful, and also what Sujata had said about, you know, perhaps like some communication coaching or getting clear, like, my mom would always say, we all have our own bag of rocks, and we unpack those bags when we can. Sometimes we throw them, sometimes we drop them, right? But we all have them. And so if we can be conscious that the person next to you, or who's just cut you off, or at the grocery store, like, they have shit too, right? And so that empathy, then I can get a little out of my own meltdown, right? And this is just maybe humanity 101, but what we're talking about, Chance, when you say like regenerative and how we can really heal, right? And I'm talking about putting more women in charge of their business, more women holding on to their own pocketbook, more women that feel their own personal power is theirs and they don't have to ask permission to have it. Then when we talk about, you know, owning our nest, like, that power also needs, it's like, it's very fragile, right? Because if it's misused, whether it's a man or a woman, right? Again, we can't just put pink on it and say like, okay, now it's fine because there's a woman in charge. We've seen women leaders not do the best job. It's not just to say we're going to fix it all. That's also a lot of things to fix. We need all of us to activate this empathy, all of us to activate our own personal power, and from a, we're going to divide and conquer, but from like, you know, we're going to clean this place up, and then we're going to be like, this feels really nice. I have some responsibility for it in that way as a leader, right?
You know, you just taught me something, Rose. I will often say to men, right, trying to reach the people that I know well, the perspective I know well, right, the white guy especially, and trying to get them to kind of move through the wall to an extra layer. There's a layer deeper that you can explore, but I'll say, don't be so sensitive. What I mean by that, right, is don't be so sensitive that it makes you go away, right? That you get like just angry or frustrated or jealous or threatened or things like that. But I kind of wonder if that's part of my programming too, as a man, right? It's like, you know, not supposed to be sensitive. Sometimes it's like, no, be sensitive, feel it, right? Wear your heart on your sleeve, be vulnerable. And if it, you know, frankly, if you are feeling threatened, let's talk about that too, right? Let's have those conversations as well. But be sensitive in a way that is thoughtful and patient, right? So just interesting, kind of getting me thinking about things a little bit. Thank you. Aurora, what do you have to add, or Sujata, either one of you want to jump in?
Well, I've so enjoyed
go ahead.
this.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead, Sujata. I'm going to let you, please. I've spoken enough. I'll have a moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I think that sensitivity can be there. And I think it's just, again, it goes back to like, if everybody would just take ownership of how they feel and what they, you know, what they think, and not play it against male and female too, you know, or be a little more honest with that, or a little more introspective. Actually, I think introspection can help everyone, no matter what the topic is, but we often don't do that. You know, we just we get triggered and we react. And I think that if as people we could even begin to recognize our triggers, which I think for some people they don't even want to recognize them. You know, it's the trigger that creates the reaction. So, but again, like, I think there's more education needed in these areas as part of something that's normal that you learn, like when you're growing up, like as a teen. Like, why isn't there a class that teaches you this social emotional health, you know? And maybe it could be a joke for some, but maybe it could be like, oh yeah, you know, like I remember they said that. But nobody teaches things of importance. I mean, look, I think it's great that you need to learn about the war in whatever century or whatever, and you need to write a paper on it. What about if you write a paper on yourself? What about if you write a paper on introspection? And hey, by the way, that would also help you with your college application and probably with other stuff too. So anyway, I could go on about that forever, but I'm going to stop right there.
That's great. That's good old fashioned the self-awareness, right? Emotional intelligence, that's the word I was looking for. So what you're describing, Sujata, and I think in a lot of this conversation is just, to me, a lot of it is sort of classic professional development, leadership development. When you do like strengths and skills test and personality test, and, you know, gender may or may not really play into even what those results are, right? It could a little bit, but a lot of those systems will collect data and report it independent of gender, but also filtered, you know, because maybe women do skew this way or men skew that way. But I think that just even being able to have a better awareness of yourself, I think Carla threw that in the chat as well, and that's sort of a theme I'm hearing in these last few minutes, is that rise above, right? Recognize where you have those triggers, to use the word, Sujata's word, I love that. Like, you recognize the triggers that may be gender oriented in some way or another, your gender or others' genders. And also recognize that apart from gender, you're carrying that bag of rocks. And what that means, what are the rocks that you tend to throw at people and why? Because the triggers could come from a woman or a man. They can come from a woman who acts very masculine, right, Rose? I totally resonate with that. I have a lot of sort of more masculine approach in my assertiveness and things like that. So I think that the importance of understanding that is because it's not all black and white as male and female. Right, we're living in a world that's so much that has so much more in the spectrum than that, and we're living in a lot of gray. And so I think one of the challenges is that people do tend to walk around thinking things in black and white, and when you respond to things in a black and white way, that's when you end up with these sort of extremes and some of the dynamics that are less healthy. And so if you just pull it all together and be comfortable with gray. Gray may be the way forward, and I'll let that be my final word.
I agree so much with that, Aurora. The gray area is something I'm working on being so comfortable in, because it's the unknown, right? It's not the definitive. Back to, we as human beings, the way that we're organized under this current power structure, this power dynamic of who's supposed to do what, right? Like that's all seemingly really black and white, right? Like, oh, well, you're like this. Like you all might not know this, but I've got tattoos up and down my arms, right? It's just a little chilly, otherwise they'd be totally out. But a lot of times people see that and they're like, not so much anymore, but probably like 10 years ago, like, oh, especially some of my elders, like, did you go to prison? Are you a sailor? I'm like, no, I just like colorful things. It's like my gardens, it's flowers and birds and all this stuff, right? I know it's ridiculous, Carla, but like we love to categorize things in a certain way because our brains love to do that. And I just think when we are asking ourselves and asking other people to be in the gray area and not, maybe not be triggered, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Versus like that person did that and this means this. And, we're getting into kind of a whole different topic of how our neural responses are to different stimulus, and then, wounding and our childhood and all this stuff. I mean, like I said, I've been in therapy for years. So like, I actually do love to dig into this, but it is also a lot of work, and having that sort of I think practice within self and self-preservation. And then knowing, back to my mom's analogy of bags of rocks, like some people dig into their bag of rock and some people are like, I'm just going to put that under my bed, or I'm just going to leave that over here. We won't talk about it. Right. And so then it's a wonder to me, I'm single, I don't have any kids, but for those people who are coupled for years and years, for those people who have multiple children, I'm all like, how are you doing it? Because like I'm barely dealing with my own shit, right? Like, and of course, like I'm intending to lead and do all this. Like now look at me, or I'm trying to be a leader. Well, I'm a leader, right? I'm a leader. I'm doing the damn thing, but I'm also just like, for me to leave the house for a couple hours, I have like 3 to 4 bags. Okay, if a child, that'd be 3 to 4 bags for that child, and me. Forget about like if there were other children, we don't have enough room for all the bags. So anyways, I'm kind of spinning off, but yes, the gray area, it's an interesting place to try to live, even though, sometimes the world wants to be very black and white.
So you said self-preservation. Here in the VIRIVERSE, we would say you should be a sustainability champion. And, think about yourself as a regenerating system. Fill your tank, right? Take care of yourself, be healthy. And that's one of the things I love about Ladyboss. When we first talked, Rose, and you were talking about, teaching mindfulness and self-care and all that stuff, right? Because especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, whether you're a lady boss or anybody else, take care of yourself, because you got a lot of work ahead of you, and you're going to need a lot of energy and a lot of rest all at the same time, in some ways, or a lot of energy and just enough rest, maybe is a better way to put it. But okay, so we'll kind of start working our way towards a close here as we come up to the top of the hour. But a couple of more questions kind of start to take us home. So one of our sustainability beacons here with Viridescent and in this immersive world of ours is that there's a silver lining in every shadow. So we've kind of weaved in out of hope and optimism and positivity and a little bit of venting and frustration and all that. And that's a really good framing to what are the silver linings, or what is a silver lining for you, Rose, in all of the things kind of that have led us here? Because we have kind of gotten to a point in this era where the power structures are not balanced, and diversity is starting to be seen as more of a strength, but it has been something seen as a weakness, or something that we should argue about or disagree with or fight about and things like that. So what are some of the silver lining, I guess? What do you see as a positive outcome that you think can really like shoot us as a streaking comet into the sky, into a sustainable future and present for that matter?
Great question. Thank you, Chance. I've said this a few times over the last couple months, and it took me a while to get here, but I think COVID, the big shadow, big dark time, right? We're still in it. And sometimes I think we busy ourselves to think we're not in it. But for me, the silver lining in this dark chapter of our humanity has been that, going inside, literally having to stay inside, literally having to reevaluate, oh my gosh, spending freeze, right? Where am I spending my money? Where am I spending my time? When I leave the house, it is for very specific purposes, sometimes only to get food. Maybe we're not even allowed to go but however many feet or yards from our residence. Like that was very recently, right? And for some people, they're still in and out of those kinds of lockdowns. And so, just being really conscious about how our time and energy is spent has been my silver lining through this pandemic. And so I've been thinking a lot about, what's my responsibility? I can, for example, we mentioned, the Kennedy years family and the deaths with, my mother and her sister and her grandmother. And I could sit, and I did, and feel real sad about that. Say, well, how can I do anything? I miss these ladies. I can't do, it's like, and that grief, that same the grief that I felt in lockdown, like, oh, well, now my business is flatlined. How can I even do anything? Every time I try to do something, either somebody dies or there's a pandemic or blah, blah, blah. All of these things are true. And I was all up in my field. But in both instances, both when I was sitting in the grief of losing my mamas, and when I was sitting in the grief of potentially losing my business, and I did have a joyous moment at one point, but I was like, well, at least none of them will die because they're already dead. Right? They can't die twice. But I realized in both those moments of grief that my opportunity to go inside and own that shadow and own that sadness and own that grief as real, feel the feels, right? And whenever I was done feeling the feels, and sometimes the feels come up and I'm like, thought I was done feeling the feels, that I can lean into my own goodness that's on the other shadow, my own power, my own glow, right? My own Musk Deer from earlier in the talk, that allows me to be an awesome leader, allows me to be a lady boss, allows me to stand firmly. Like, I know what I'm here to do. Damn it, I miss my mama and my auntie and my grandma and my granny and my ladies. I miss them, but I'm also honoring them by and I'm doing this because of their influence on me, right? Like in COVID, damn it, I thought my business was going to be XYZ by now. Like I was really thinking I would already be that, world famous global director of photography, photographing and making movies with all of these beautiful women. Damn it, I thought that was already going to happen. It's like, well, we know that success is not like this. It's more like all of these different things.
Circular, hopefully.
Circular. Yeah, totally. And that's very feminine, right? Like it's not a straight line. It is a circular. It's the space of the womb. It's the space of the planet. It's the space of sustainability. And just that, if I can lean into that sadness in order to understand more clearly what my role is and how I can show up even better as a human. I thought I was doing okay before, but oh wow, is my team diverse? Am I conscious of the packaging? Am I all these different things that last year was like, what about this? What about this? Okay. And I'm not ready to get up until I have answered these questions for myself. So that's my silver lining is when it is dark and shadowy, there's often lots of lessons that we can learn. And that happens still every day for me, but ugly cries still happen.
Well, I think it's safe to say that your family is very proud. And I think there's such a wonderful tie here, in a very dark way, no doubt, to COVID. We've lost so many humans across the world, and it is our obligation to move forward better, be better as we go forward, right? Be healthier, be more balanced, be more sustainable. And you talk about circularity being feminine, Mother Earth, right? And no, that doesn't mean that there's not a Father Universe or sky or star out there, right, that created Earth or whatever. We can go way down that rabbit hole, right? But that this is exactly kind of what we're talking about. Let's have those conversations. Let's explore all that stuff, and be open to it, because women have strengths, men have strengths, everybody has strengths. We all have weaknesses, and anywhere and everywhere between. But if we're together, if we're a puzzle that fits together, we are so much stronger for it. And so I think it is certainly an opportunity for, let's make the people that have been lost to COVID, to climate, to other things that humans have missed along the way, let's make them proud by moving forward in a healthier way, right? Oh, the feels. All right. So 2 more questions. So let's kind of, we're going to swing way back over to business a little bit. And as the question we always ask, Rose, is what is like the one piece of advice that you would give to the intrapreneur out there? And you can talk directly to the lady bosses if you like, or you can kind of talk to everyone. It's totally up to you how you'd like to answer the question. But what's that big piece of advice for somebody that is kind of getting started? Because that's a little bit where you're at, although you're further along your journey than just getting started. You're getting after it and going for it, right? A lot of our audiences in similar boats. They've got good ideas. They're making a little progress, but they want more, right? They want to push forward. They want to make more change. What's the advice you would give to them?
Oh, great question. Thank you, Chance. Keep showing up. Keep showing up. And it actually blows my mind each time I hear anybody say, well, you're further along. I'm like, am I? Am I? And how do we chart progress, right? Is it by how much money is in our bank account? Is it how our team feels at the end of the week? Is it by like, I'm one of those people, again, Achilles heel, it must be in my terrier blood, that like, I don't often stop and acknowledge accomplishment. I'm like, we did the thing, let's go, right? We did the thing, let's go to the next thing. And so, and that can immediately be burnout. I think that's some patriarchal training in there. It's like, keep going, right? Which makes it really hard to actually keep showing up if you don't acknowledge what you have accomplished, right? And like I said, everybody's bar of accomplishment is different. And this makes me think of a recent song by Queen Beyonce and Jay-Z. It's called Boss. And Jay-Z riffs into this, like, you know, here we determine wealth by how many people are wealthy next to you. And I love that line. It's like, yes. And I love that Jay-Z and Beyonce, they do things together. But anyways, I'll digress, because that could be its own talk, right? But I just think that, you know, and this is not gendered. This isn't ladies or men or theys or thems. This is like for humans, like if we believe in it, then we have to keep showing up. And even when we think there was a stint of time, like I think it was like 5 weeks, where there was an old white guy who basically told me I wasn't man enough for the job. Like I was like, please don't patronize me. He was like, it's actually pronounced patronizing. I was like, right. And then I was like in another space. Look at Aurora's face. Oh boy. I was in another space talking about white reparations, and this Latina woman was like, you're not brown enough for this conversation. I was like, okay. And then the week after that, I was in a real life conversation when a young they told me I wasn't gay enough for this work. And then just after that, one of my own brethren of the Jewish tribe were kind of like, see, I don't know if you're being smart about this from a Jewish perspective. And I'm like, all right, people, that's it, you know, because like I am here to do this work, and we're going to, you know, if liberals keep canceling each other, like I already know I won't get down on that, but you know what I'm saying? Just showing up.
No,
somebody needs to say it, because the problem is that, you know, it's hard. You feel like, oh, well, I'm not supposed to put that person down because they're a they or whatever it is that they are. And it does feel a little bit like, I love the way you say that liberals cancel each other. And I also feel like it's ironic, because it's like, wait a minute. So is the way forward that you now get to act like the aggressive assholes that came, you know, white assholes that kind of led to this situation? Or aren't we all supposed to be like transforming our behavior? Now that's different than giving people space to speak truth and all that. That's a different story, and we have to do that. But I think like comments like what you were saying, I'm always shocked by that, because it's like, you've just basically said that I'm not allowed to be part of this conversation. How exactly did you want to learn about your perspective? Because you've just asked me to leave the conversation, right? And I get if you want me to not talk as much, so you can. That's totally legit. But I don't get to say anything. I don't get to participate in this. I don't get to process what you're telling me and integrate it into my being so that then I can be different moving forward. Like that's how that works, right? And so I think there has to be, it's sometimes I feel like where that's coming from is a very immature place, right? The people who tend to do that tend to be immature in general, right? If you took skin and gender and everything out of it, they would tend to be a little bit on the immature side, just in terms of their professional respect and human relationships, right? So it does get it tricky when it's like, oh my gosh, now we're trying to move this conversation forward, but we have to pause a minute and remember that you're acting like a 10-year-old, right? So how do we respectfully get through that? Because I can't just tell you you're acting like a 10-year-old and that be it, because oh my goodness, I'm opening a can of worms. So anyway, I love what you're sharing, Rose. I love the authenticity of that.
Something I'd add here too, we've kind of gotten into something that's really relevant in the times we live in, and maybe it's a conversation for another, well, it is a conversation for another day, certainly, but it, kind of talking about like, so often like Aurora, kind of talking about like white assholes or privileged people in privilege that are, whatever, perpetuating problems or whatever. Like conservatives in America get painted as the villains in so much of this stuff. Like, hey, liberals, and mirror back around a little bit, right? Because we all play a part in the struggles and the failures of this. And I think that is I loved what Sujata said earlier. And Sean, I see you raise your hand. I'll throw it to you here next. I love what Sujata said about being accountable and like owning how we feel a little bit, but being willing to kind of meet that somewhere with how somebody else feels and meet in the middle there. There's a bridge that is needed. And there is no right, wrong, good, bad in so many of the gray areas of what Rose alluded to earlier. The gray areas of this is where the real work can be done. So yeah, Sean, great to have you. I'll pin you up here on stage.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, ladies, for sharing your experience today. Right, and just listening to you guys kind of talk, and it made me think of a few things. One is this type of bias that you're referring to is prevalent in most cultures, whether it's gender or sexual orientation or class, or race, whatever that might be, whatever it is, there are biases like this. And I've experienced a lot of this or witnessed it a lot, I should say, a word, from being in a meeting with a leader, a senior leader in an organization saying, don't hire women for these management roles because they're not capable, to protesting or saying, I don't invite, I don't want to do business with people with Indian sounding names. They don't buy, right? This type of bias is, in my experience, is all over the place. And I kind of was thinking of something that you were sharing about, let's not forget necessarily that sometimes the bias that you're experiencing comes from a place of a person who's being biased as a mental illness, right? Like if it's always me, I want to talk, and talk over you, you might be talking to a narcissist, and that bias might not be coming from from a position of negativity based off of your gender, but your perception might be that. So kind of Rose, to kind of throw a story that you shared, some of those guys that you're sharing about, I mean, let's not forget, like, some people are just jerks, and that doesn't mean that that you don't have something very valuable to say. That means that they're just an asshole, and let's not waste a lot of energy worrying about what assholes do and think and say.
Thanks for saying that, Sean. And that's one of my, probably part of my human design is that, like, I'm just like, please, everybody, like, come to the party. Yeah, like, you're having fun. Come on. Right. And sometimes there's just, like you said, there's just asshole people. I'm like, why you gotta be an asshole? Do you want to talk about that? It's like, don't even try to talk with an asshole, Rose. Like, honestly,
Can I add something to that? Chance, I wanted to bring up a moment when we had all first joined Clubhouse, and we were both in a room about sustainability. And I raised my hand and I talked about what I'm trying to promote, which is the tagline, just do one thing so you're not overwhelmed, because it's a big monster, and that's how a movement starts, you know. And so after I said my piece, there was a person in there that told me that what I was saying was not good enough, that's not how you really create change, and this, that, and the other. He's actually a figure in the Los Angeles area, and I'm not going to mention his name. He is in the entertainment industry, and I'm in that industry as well. And I just thought that was so strange that he would behave like that. He would say that. And Chance, along with, I'm not kidding, 9 other people, sent me a message on my inbox saying that, that was awful what he did. And he made me doubt myself. I have to say, he made me doubt what I was trying to do. And I just wanted to share that with you, because yes, there are people out there actually do it in a Clubhouse room like that. That's just even like not in the workplace. And this is someone who hosts his own room, and he's not like a total nobody. I'm not going to put him on a huge pedestal because he shouldn't be on there. But yeah, I thought that was really weird, and I wanted to share.
Yeah, can I interject another thought there along that line of thinking? Some like those stories that are sharing in a boardroom where a senior manager is saying, "Hey, don't hire women for this job." My reaction was, "Well, you just said that out loud in 2019 in a room with witnesses. Really? You're okay with that?" And they were comfortable in their opinions about gender and leadership roles. And I was very not comfortable with that decision, or with that statement, that sentiment, right? We soon, not too long later, found a way to part ways in business because this is not sustainable. It's not tenable. And frankly, it was embarrassing to be associated with that person.
Oh my gosh, Sean, I love, first of all, that hilarious, characterization. It's a very serious thing, but sometimes, framing things that are very serious in a funny light just sort of intensifies the revelation of how ridiculous this is, right? And it makes me think of one of the things I'm super passionate about. The thing that got me into this work in the first place 15, 20 years ago is justice. And the social side of things was always sort of my first leading. And I love examples of using social enterprise and business to offer opportunities to those who are shut out of opportunities. And one of my favorite examples of that is organizations that are all about providing job opportunities and ways forward for those who are coming out of the prison system, which we don't even have time to unpack how unjust and racist that whole situation is. But there's this one guy I follow on LinkedIn, Harley Blakeman, I think is his name. Chance, maybe he would be a great guy to invite on this in the future. He posted something the other day about like he got turned down for like a rental application, got turned down for like a job selling chicken, but he just got $1.1 million in seed money for this. He's got an organization called Honest Jobs, and he's really trying to bring jobs to this population. Well, he had also posted something recently about sort of getting a conversation around hiring people with records and backgrounds and sort of the barriers to that. And some of the comments on LinkedIn, same thing, Sean, that's why I was just like my reaction, because I was like, you just wrote that in public for the world to see. Your like closed-minded, negative view of people coming out of prison, that they don't deserve opportunities and taxpayer dollars. I mean, it was like a political rant, kind of like, and I was like, oh my God. And it was an eye-opening, because I have to remind myself that I live in a bubble. I talk to only people like you, people who believe in what I believe in. And I just had to kind of step back and be like, wow, there's a lot of people in the world who think like this person thinks. I have to be careful not to judge, right? He's coming from his perspective and whatever that is. But it just is important to remember that that is the reality. Those are the people who have to change. We're doing a great job of talking to ourselves. This has been a really fun 2 hours of like, preaching to the choir, literally, because that's what we're doing. But we do have to think about how I have to challenge myself. How did I reach out to that guy? Because my first instinct is like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I don't want to have to talk to you. I don't want to. But wait a minute, aren't you the person I really am trying to change? Aren't you the person I really am trying to convince, right? And so I think it's really important to, I agree with you, Sean, set boundaries and say, be gone, but also like, okay, but what is my opportunity to open your eyes to just how ignorant and backward it is, and move you into something, show you the light, just to close the loop on our light theme.
Well, Chance here. Yeah, we got to kind of work to a close. I know Rose got to jump off here in a minute, and I want to kind of offer her the final word on this. But on that, and I think this will lead to this last question, is that here in the VIRIVERSE, we fight for the best of humans, but we also acknowledge that we all have the worst in us too. There's an inner asshole to all of us. There's a jerk riding around in there somewhere, right? So I think my question over to you, Rose, is, what is your approach for bringing out the best in you, and how can others do that? Because if I just say fight that inner jerk, right? Because you're going to be much happier if you operate from here in the heart, right, rather than wherever the darkness comes from, I suppose, right? So what is your approach to bringing out the best in yourself? And we've seen it a lot today. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Chance. And thank you, everybody that's still here and those who were here earlier and left. This has been a really great conversation. This is something that I do work on daily. In fact, I was really challenged with this over the weekend. I won't get into details, but there was, we'll just say, using Sean's word, there was a pretty big asshole in my face right after a very awe-inspiring, glowy event. And in some cases, I reacted great, and in other cases, I reacted terrible, right? And so my work, in fact, and I'll challenge you, Chance, on using the word fight, is that I'm not fighting the patriarchy, because I saw what happened when I tried to fight the patriarchy the other day. It didn't work out, right? And everybody was upset. Everybody was crying. Everybody was hurt after what was a beautiful display earlier in the day of women being really beautifully supported and glowing. And one of my friends said, well, we really kicked around some of that patriarchy. The dust was floating in the air. Apparently it pissed some of them off and they had to come and, anyways, I don't want to get into it. But what I know is that I am here for building different systems, for supporting different ways of doing life, of flipping the script on how we do commerce, because ultimately commerce drives community. Commerce drives how things get done, how we can eat, how we can sleep, where we can eat, where we can sleep, right? I know there's a lot of other factors like where the shoreline is and if you can safely eat and sleep there, right? But also that when we talk about fighting something, like I was trying to fight the patriarchy the other night and it didn't work out. And what I need to do, to stand for equality. I need to stand for women being respected, that a man wouldn't get in her face. I need to stand for there being better of us communicating and better ways of us sharing space together. And so when I fight fire with fire, and she is a fiery ginger terrier, let me say, I feel really cool for a minute, and then I feel really bad because I didn't actually represent the true glowy nature of this lady boss. And so it is my work every day to show up in an authentic, empathetic, and real leadership of what a woman-led looks like, that is can be, emotional, can be courageous, can be sad, can be all of these things. We're all very dynamic individuals if we allow ourselves to be. And so I need to allow myself that, so when I lead, other people can see that through integrity, but also that through vulnerability. And so I am a work in progress every day. And any stages I've shared with you all you hear me say, people say, and I am complete, or I'm done speaking. I always say, and I am a work in progress, because I am, and I am going to be the first one to admit that I do not have this all figured out. It's just that I have a ton of chutzpah, and I'm really eager to see things be, changed and be more supportive of women and everyone.
An asteroid just hit the VIRIVERSE. We have to change our tagline, because it is, we stand up for the best of humanity. As a kid, I was bullied a lot, and I never fought. I always just tried to stand up to them. Wow, you just completely rocked the VIRIVERSE, Rose. Honestly, we're gonna change, like the opener video even, it will change. So thank you to the VIRIVERSE changemaker that is the OG Ladyboss. That is incredible. Awesome. Well, this has been a super wonderful conversation. Rose, of course, thank you so much for the time that you've given and the amazing wisdom and insights. We will be posting this as both on-demand video and a podcast experience, and we'll be getting all those links out to everybody. And of course, thank you to the lovely changemaker, Aurora. So glad to have you here with us co-hosting. Aurora is going to be back a lot to co-host these conversations with us, so more to come. And of course, Sean as the architect, and Sujata, I think we still need to get you an official alter ego character, but so happy to have you up here with us.
I just signed up and did it. So
oh yes,
yeah,
yes.
So you're going to work on it.
I am going to work on it.
Yes, please. How do we connect, Chance? Tell us.
Yeah, so we are building a human mycelium. And Carla's taking care of it in the chat a little bit, but we're building a human mycelium, which is a collective intelligence of sustainability champions trying to change the world. So certainly the best way to get the group connected as a starting point is to subscribe to our email experience, but Wonder is also a really great place to connect as well. We are building a partnership with them to take people on these lifelong journeys, chat boards and spaces and things where we can resource share. For now, though, we will post everybody's contact information in the show notes for these postings. So thank you so much. For anybody, again, if you subscribe to our work and whatnot, you will get access to the backstage pass to give it a go and meet this awesome community. And then Rose won't let you go. She will keep you there, I have no doubt. Right. So
I'll keep checking in. I'll keep saying, hey, where you going, lady?
Awesome, cool. Okay, well, to work our way to a close, we're going to have some light nature elements to take us out the door with some sound, of course, in Rose's honor. So thank you so much to everybody that has participated today, and stay tuned for more to come from the VIRIVERSE. This is your Vera Vigilantes signing out. Later, friends.
Bye, everybody. Ciao for now. Thank you.